Welcome to our short video on school self-evaluation. Love it or hate it, nearly everyone has one, and there is a great variety of them. But what are the key principles that help to define whether a self-evaluation is effective or not? Well, this is a personal choice based on 20 years of reading them from many different schools. Given the wide variety of opinions, no doubt you will agree with some and disagree with others. But these are the ones that I've found to actually work in practice. My name is Adrian Gray. I had many years as an HMI with Ofsted in senior roles, and I've also worked as a school improvement consultant up and down the country. As it happens, I'm also a historian, which may be why I'm interested in schools' evidence about themselves. Over the years, I have found many head teachers confused by how to do their school self-evaluation. This has often been because it is an area affected by fashion. One minute you need to do something detailed, the next you're being told to restrict it to one page. So let's ignore the fashion of the moment and ask ourselves, what principles should you follow in building effective school self-evaluation? School self-evaluation has often been linked with inspection, which is unfortunate as it has confused people's thinking. The reason you evaluate your school is because it will make a difference to your own school's improvement. But school self-evaluation has to matter to you. If school leaders do not treat it seriously, they will never manage to establish a culture of self-evaluation that runs right through the school. So you need to put time into it. Ultimately, you need everyone to be open to critical self-review as well. This is part of promoting a collaborative learning culture. So leaders have to treat the self-evaluation as important. They have to discuss it and they have to show that they are guided by it. Then everyone will come to see it as part of the way we do things. You should also treat it as your record of where you are. It should be central to discussions with trustees, governors, school improvement support and each other within the school. Which all means, of course, that it should be always up to date, which we will come on to. It has to be based on evidence. Well, I would argue this is the most important principle, as a school self-evaluation not based on clear data is worth very little. I have read too many SEFs that are full of anecdotes when schools should be asking themselves, how do we know? You might think behaviour in your school is better than in other schools, but how do you know? Good self-evaluations are always underpinned by good data, some of it collected from systematic monitoring and some from statistical data or survey data. The opinions of pupils and staff are important evidence. Therefore, it is important to be data literate. You need to be comfortable with using quantified evidence and to be welcoming of it. It is not suspicious in itself. Well-organised schools start by asking themselves what evidence they already have and then what evidence they do not have. What areas of school activity do you actually know little about? Often areas like personal development are an evidence-free zone in the self-evaluation. But if you do my full training, which I'll talk about later, I can give you examples to solve this sort of problem. But be careful, evidence needs to be updated regularly as well. Yes, updated regularly. In the old days, stories used to be told of the head teacher writing the self-evaluation for the year while lying on a beach in Greece or somewhere. Probably the self-evaluation was only then intended to be read by Ofsted on the chance that they came. This sort of approach has no impact on school improvement. The self-evaluation actually needs to be divided into sections, each with a schedule for when it should be updated. Each section, having been updated, should then be reviewed by the senior team, governors, etc. Some sections need updating more often than others. You might update attendance or behaviour sections termly, but curriculum perhaps once a year. The key is never to be trapped with an out-of-date self-evaluation. That means it should always reflect your current understanding of the school, which comes back to the point you have to put some time into it. The head teacher on the beach model is also a problem, as it implies only one person has control and input. It works far better if the school self-evaluation is divided into sections according to senior staff responsibilities. Those people then update their sections according to the review schedule and then bring the sections to be discussed by the senior team as a whole. A good senior team will then provide mutual and supportive challenge. Do we all agree that this is how the school really is? This is part of a characteristic of effective schools in being receptive to critical perspectives. A self-evaluation that does not involve some critique is pretty pointless. So here we are looking for the senior team and perhaps others to operate as mutual critical friends in a discussion about the evaluation. Now, in bigger schools, it also helps to have a data manager on the team. They can do a lot of the routine data updating for you and also prompt senior leaders when evaluations need to be brought up to date as well. Principle 5 is that your CEF should be comprehensive. Most of you will have heard of the concept of the CEF on a page. Let's be clear, you cannot evaluate a school in a page. You can, though, have a summary on a page, providing it is backed up by a proper and thorough self-evaluation. Many people use the inspection framework to define the content of their self-evaluation, which is fine. However, you may have other things you do that are important to you, and you can include these as well. If you approach the issue methodically, you'll probably find there are areas that actually you know very little about. This is a good thing to discover, and it is best to find this sort of thing out when you haven't got inspectors in the room with you. To avoid this sort of problem, you need to start with a comprehensive template. Going on the teamwork point, I would also allocate a name to each section of that template and set them a date to complete it. In my early days working with Ofsted and schools in special measures, there was a bit of a narrative that the worse the school was, the longer its CEF became. This was usually because schools lacked real analytical insight and used to follow the model of what I called list and hope, giving lots of information and anecdote in the hope that some of it might stick and create a good impression. Often the result was the opposite. If you've got good evidence, you need very little extra text, as the evidence should largely speak for itself. You might give your evidence, preferably quantified, and then simply add a sentence or two to comment on its significance or perhaps patterns of change. Anecdotes are not then needed. Let's take extracurricular provision. You could give me lots of anecdotes about what a wonderful time pupils have had, list all the activities and all the things that they've made in craft sessions. But actually, we need the evidence about who's involved. What proportion of pupils attend at least once a week? How many boys or girls? How many pupil premium, etc. If we know that 75% of the pupils go at least once a week, that is a powerful start. You can then just add a comment about why you think you are so successful and any developing trends. Many people struggle with whether or not to have judgments on each area. There are arguments both ways on this. But what matters most is that your self-evaluation clearly identifies your school's strengths and especially its weaknesses. Once your weaknesses are clear, the self-evaluation should help you decide which of those should be your priorities for your development plan. This is where the team comes together. reviewing the issues they have identified, risk assessing each one, and deciding what goes into the school development plan. Again, there's a critique and a mutual critical friend attitude here. People worry about Ofsted and having grades in their self-evaluation. There is no rule that says you have to have any, nor can inspectors demand that you give them any. After all, self-evaluation is not compulsory. However, you really ought to know what your weaknesses are and be able to discuss what you are doing about them. But it's the inspector's job to make the judgment. Finally, your school self-evaluation and your development plan should be clearly linked to each other. They should speak the same language. Sadly, I've often seen development plans where the priorities seem to have little or no relationship with any weaknesses identified in the school self-evaluation. In fact, on occasions, I've come across schools which really did not have any active self-evaluation at all, but contrived to put together a development plan with some fairly erratically chosen priorities. Your development plan priorities should be derived from a discussion about your self-evaluation. There should also be much common ground regarding data. The same data you use to evidence your self-evaluation can be helping to inform and provide targets for your development plan. In fact, quantified data is essential to this. It's much easier to set a target if you know where you are starting from. Well, we have outlined some principles for effective self-evaluation, but there is so much more I could say. To provide more detail, I run a number of courses and workshops which put some flesh on these bones. For example, by helping you decide on what quantified evidence you need to build up. I also run workshops for head teachers where we get together and work alongside each other in creating an effective self-evaluation. You can get in touch with me using the details on this screen. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like my channel.